I'm Paisley, and last summer, I developed a somewhat obsessive preparedness for an encounter with a creature that could have potentially threatened my life. My plan for the summer was to volunteer at a Komodo dragon sanctuary in Indonesia, which had left my parents understandably concerned about my safety. To ease their worries, they insisted I receive every available vaccination from the travel clinic and insisted on packing an embarrassingly large first aid kit. When the other volunteers in the program caught wind of my extensive vaccinations, they couldn't help but chuckle. "Looks like we got a bit of a hypochondriac on our hands," the group leader quipped. But I reasoned, better safe than sorry, right? Plus, my brother had warned me about the prevalence of snakes in Indonesia, and since I had a deep-seated fear of snakes, I had taken to watching YouTube videos to learn how to defend against them. Yes, I was genuinely prepared for anything, and I proudly referred to it as my snake dance. This was my snake dance. Step 1. Identify the approaching snake. Step 2. If the snake begins to chase, grab a stick and run in a circular pattern, tapping the ground around me with the stick. Step 3. As a last resort, climb a tree and keep the snake within sight, monitoring it closely. You see, I was ready for whatever might come my way. During the flight to Indonesia, I happened to be seated next to the group leader. As the flight dragged on, boredom crept in, and I decided to offer a demonstration of my snake dance. I even rose from my seat, ready to perform. But just as I was about to begin, turbulence hit and a stern announcement came over the loudspeaker. "Would the lady dancing in the aisle please return to her seat immediately?" I won't deny it, the situation was rather embarrassing. Upon our arrival, we were escorted to the Komodo Dragon Reserve and shown to our accommodations, which can be best described as glorified huts. We were situated in a small village within the reserve, and it was quite a shock. The facilities were basic, with outdoor toilets and an overall rather unpleasant atmosphere. As we were given a tour by a ranger, he advised us to exercise caution during the night, particularly when it rained, as the rising river could easily pose a threat. He also warned us about the presence of snakes. I was about to interject with my snake dance wisdom, but a stern look from our group leader made it clear that I should keep quiet, so I did. Suddenly, something came charging toward us, and I let out a scream of surprise. I instinctively grabbed a stick, only to realize it was a Komodo dragon. I couldn't believe my eyes. We had actually encountered one. It raced past us as if it were in a hurry, and then we noticed its pursuit, a snake. The ranger encouraged us to stay quiet, suggesting we might witness an attack. The snake remained blissfully unaware of the dragon's presence. All at once, the Komodo dragon pounced and devoured the snake in just 2 swift gulps. "Wow!" exclaimed one of the boys. "It happened so rapidly that I could hardly process it. But they don't eat people, right?" I nervously inquired, referring to the Komodo dragons. Everyone burst into laughter, and our tour continued. Fatigue from the long journey and jet lag was beginning to take its toll, and all I wanted was to get some rest. For dinner, they'd arranged a special welcome ceremony with local dancers and traditional cuisine. We enjoyed chicken and rice, followed by a local delicacy that was deep-fried and quite spicy. Surprisingly, I found it quite tasty and had a generous helping. The ranger noticed my enjoyment and grinned as he took a bite, remarking, "Seems like you're savoring those grasshoppers." My reaction was immediate. I spat them out in surprise. Grasshoppers? I had thought they were some kind of fried vegetables or something similar. The rest of the night left me feeling uneasy. As I lay in bed, I knew it was likely just my imagination, but my stomach was knotted with discomfort. So despite my apprehension, I decided to make the short trip to the bathroom. It was only a 2-minute walk from my hut, but the pitch-black surroundings and the deafening noise of crickets outside had me on edge. The crickets' incessant chirping made me even more nervous. The bathroom was located down by the river, so I quickened my pace, attempting to suppress thoughts of the creatures lurking in the darkness. However, a sound nearby caught my attention, causing me to abruptly turn and shine my flashlight in its direction. That's when I froze in place. There, outside the cabin, stood a young girl, absorbed in play. Her sudden appearance startled me, but I couldn't fathom why she was outside at such a late hour. I approached her cautiously, and she noticed me, bringing her index finger to her lips, signaling for silence. Maybe she wants to play a game, I thought to myself. Despite my need to use the bathroom, I felt compelled to ensure she was all right. As I drew closer, her eyes widened in shock and she darted away, leaving me bemused. I nearly chuckled, thinking I had unintentionally frightened her. However, my attention was diverted when I realized I had stepped on something and I looked down at my feet. It turned out I had inadvertently trodden on a snake's tail. I wondered if snakes ever slept, but this one was clearly awake as it began to slither. I managed to sprint away just in time before it could coil itself around my ankle, and then it began pursuing me. In my panic, all my knowledge and strategies seemed to escape me. I couldn't even find a stick to defend myself. Yelling would have only woken everyone up, and I was already considered a bit eccentric. So I sprinted toward the river, hoping to shake off the snake, perhaps finding refuge behind some reeds. The Komodo dragons were known to frequent the area by the river, and I thought they might offer some protection if the snake persisted in chasing me. I felt a sudden wetness on my ankle and initially thought it was the river's edge. However, when I glanced down, my heart pounded with terror as I saw a snake's tongue flicking just beside me. It was dangerously close. My instinct kicked in, and I began kicking my legs vigorously in the hope of scaring the snake away. I sprinted so hastily that I dropped my flashlight, hearing the unfortunate sound of it shattering as it hit the ground. Suddenly, I found myself engulfed in absolute darkness. With the snake's presence still looming, I attempted to find my way back to my hut, but I was hopelessly disoriented. My vision was limited to the river, and it seemed like my only option. I didn't even consider the potential dangers of crocodiles or water snakes lurking beneath the surface. I simply plunged in. I remained submerged until I could no longer hold my breath. In a moment of panic, I felt something brush against my leg, and I let out a scream, momentarily forgetting that I was still underwater. Gasping for air, I surfaced and coughed up the river water I had inadvertently swallowed. To my relief, it turned out to be nothing more than some algae entangling my leg. Fortunately, the snake had disappeared from my sight. Summoning all my remaining strength, I dragged myself out of the water and onto the riverbank. I lay there trembling and drained, my body exhausted from the ordeal of being chased by a snake and nearly drowning. However, the thought of returning to my hut still haunted me. What if the snake was lurking nearby, waiting for my return? I must have drifted into sleep, for the next thing I felt was an unusual pressure around my waist. For an instant, I imagined I was back home, believing it might be my pet dog, Biscuit. But then reality flooded in. I was outdoors in Indonesia, and this tightness around me grew more intense. Something heavy was squeezing me, making it impossible to stand. It dragged me downward, and as it approached my head, I saw a gaping hole that sent a chill down my spine. In a horrifying turn of events, darkness enveloped me, and I was convinced I had tumbled into the river. Desperately, I tried to claw my way back to the surface, but I found myself trapped. It was as if the walls were closing in, and the sensation of drowning overwhelmed me. Panic set in as I extended my hand, frantically searching for any way out. But instead, I began slipping away. It felt as though an incredible pressure was pushing me downward, propelling me through a damp and adhesive passage. In a fleeting moment, I glimpsed a faint glimmer of light before it vanished completely. That's when the horrifying realization hit me. I was inside the snake. It had swallowed me whole, and my chances of survival seemed grim. Panic surged through me as I struggled to breathe. Realizing there was no escape, I was destined to meet my end within the belly of this serpent. The confines of the snake's stomach were stifling and suffocating, akin to being trapped in an exceedingly tight sleeping bag, except it was damp and sweltering. I briefly pondered if this sensation resembled the feeling of being in the womb. However, that thought swiftly faded as the stark reality of my predicament set in. I was going to die inside this snake. An inkling of hope briefly crossed my mind. I contemplated the possibility of crawling my way out, yet the constriction of my body within the snake was so severe that I distinctly heard a dreadful crunching noise. Initially, I couldn't fathom what it was, but then it dawned on me. Those were the sounds of my own bones shattering. Overwhelmed by agony, I attempted to scream, but the sound was muffled, as if my mouth had been sealed shut. There was nowhere for my cries to escape. They simply dissipated into the dark abyss. As the snake shifted slightly, it felt as though I was being dragged mercilessly over sharp rocks, intensifying the nightmare that had become my reality. I had reached the point of surrender. Exhaustion weighed me down, leaving me devoid of the strength to fight any longer. The snake had triumphed, and I succumbed to the inevitable. This was not the demise I had envisioned for myself. A girl consumed by a serpent was the haunting thought that crossed my mind. Then, silence enveloped me. In the eerie stillness, I began to drift into an abyss. I could scarcely hear anything, as if submerged underwater. My name reverberated faintly, obscured and indistinct. It felt as though I existed in a hazy, dreamlike state. Suddenly, a cacophony of screams and numerous voices shattered the tranquility. I perceived the world as if through a watery veil. Abruptly, a deafening sound, akin to the swing of a machete, pierced through the haze. It was followed by a blinding flash of light and a rush of cool air. Then, nothingness. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital room. The ranger was present, along with the little girl I had encountered earlier. As they noticed my eyes opening, they rushed outside and summoned our guide and some of the other volunteers. Their pallid and distressed expressions mirrored the gravity of the situation. "She's alive," the group leader exclaimed. The realization struck me like a thunderbolt. My survival was nothing short of miraculous. My thoughts turned to the snake, to its gaping maw and its attempt to consume me whole. My body was swathed in bandages, and a sharp pain coursed through me. I learned that some of my ribs had been crushed and broken during the ordeal. A little girl had witnessed the incident and informed her father, the ranger. He had swiftly wielded his machete, cutting the serpent open. Upon discovering me within its belly, he had fainted. Evidently, no one had ever emerged alive after being swallowed by a snake. Among the people in the reserve, I was regarded as something of a miracle. Our group leader explained that the snake, being old, had perished following its ill-fated attempt to consume me. What? They cut me out of a dead snake? The situation grew increasingly bizarre. Then, a young man arrived and expressed his desire to speak with me. I explained that I was unwell, but he persisted. He identified himself as a snake expert from a nearby reserve and claimed he had never encountered anyone like me before. He implored me, saying, "Please tell me how you survived. What did you do?" "It's like magic." I was at a loss, lacking any explanation. He continued to marvel at the magnificence of snakes, suggesting that the snake that had swallowed me must have been exceptionally intelligent not to harm me. He even proposed the idea that I might possess a unique ability to influence snakes. Then I recollected my snake dance, and his theory suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps I had been focusing on the wrong animal all along. Shortly before departing, my parents arrived, shedding tears of relief. They insisted I accompany them back home without delay. However, just before my departure, the snake expert reappeared, bearing a gift. He urged me not to open it until I reached home. It turned out to be a bag crafted from the skin of the snake that had met its demise attempting to engulf me. Along with this gift, he shared his email address and requested permission to feature my story in a snake journal. I consented. Our correspondence flourished. He affectionately referred to me as his snake princess and admitted he couldn't stop thinking about me. He believed I could be a valuable addition to his snake research team. In a surprising turn of events, he invited me to volunteer at his sanctuary and work closely with the snakes next summer. Can you believe it? I said yes. Having already experienced life from within a snake's body and emerged unscathed, I figured it might be time to delve deeper into the intricate world of the serpent, both in body and mind.